This is the Pipkin and Turnbull Show, episode number 6, coming to you this November 12th, 2019. Got an awesome show in store for you guys, especially those who, a lot of bitter speaking for me and my man Jamie. But we're going to have a good time. It's going to be a good Tuesday night.
Yep.
But we will be having a little bit of our pity party for a little bit of the show. So bear with us
uh,
through the pain of some things
yeah.
that happened this weekend. But just a lot of awesome things, a lot of great games happened this weekend at the same time. Jamie, you got the rundown for us this week?
I do, man. All right. So once again, we're going to look at our NFL power rankings. We're going to uh, our reaction to Alabama and LSU and any playoff implications in that. And then we're going to look at the KSI versus Logan Paul boxing match and discuss if it's good for the sport of boxing and will celebrity boxing bring back popularity to the sport.
All right.
That's what we got.
So please apologize our Jamie zooming back and forth. We've had that a couple episodes. We don't know why. So we'll figure that one out. And I've got a
Yeah.
barking neighbor's dog behind me. So that's some fun things going on tonight. All right.
Yep.
So we'll take a look at some power rankings for this week as we usually do, and some reactions to some NFL games that happened. A lot of things kind of moved in the NFL this weekend. Um, and so usually, just so you guys know, what we usually follow as kind of a baseline is ESPN's power rankings. There's a lot of
Mhm.
websites, the NFL, a lot of sports websites will rank the teams at different spots, but we usually use ESPN for ours. So if you ever want to follow along or see where we're getting our reference from, we're getting it from ESPN.com. You can just
Mhm.
Google search ESPN's top 10 or their power rankings, and it will give you the list of the 32 teams, which is kind of interesting, the way that ESPN has things playing out. There's some areas I agree, and some I kind of question where they have teams at. Um,
Yeah.
where I think where I first want to start, kind of where I look at the power rankings is kind of what kind of shook these power rankings. I feel kind of the most is Seattle versus San Francisco. And if you didn't get a chance to see the game last night, you can definitely go watch the highlights on
Mhm.
YouTube. But definitely worth it. I would say probably the best game of the year so far.
Yeah.
It was absolutely crazy.
Mhm.
And it was more than what we could have hoped for. We knew last week
Mhm.
when we were talking about it that this was an amazing matchup, and it played out to be an amazing game. Jamie, what were some of your
Yeah.
first reactions from that Seattle San Francisco game last night?
Man, so I couldn't take my eyes off the screen because like anytime Seattle would get the lead, like San Francisco would come back because I'd be like, man, Seattle's gonna run away with it, and then San Francisco would come running back, and I kept telling my wife last night, I'm like, this is gonna be San Francisco's chance. It's in San Fran. I don't see them going to Seattle and beating this team. But my mind kind of changed a little bit after watching it. San Fran is for real. And I've been saying it for a little bit now because like everyone, whenever it was the Chiefs, Patriots, and San Fran as the only undefeated teams, everyone was like, "Well, the Chiefs and the Patriots are the real team. You know, San Fran will drop off." And then the Chiefs dropped off, and then the Patriots dropped off, and it was just San Fran, and everybody started kind of paying attention at that point. San Fran, like I just feel they're really complete. Now, Jim Garoppolo made some mistakes last night, and he was throwing it some areas that, just, if he does that 9 out of 10 times, it's going to get intercepted and it's going to be really bad for him. He got lucky a couple times last night. And I would say he is their weakest link, which is not bad for San Fran because San Fran he's good. And for him to be their weak link is good because he's good. And I don't see them losing very many more games. I don't know what their next game is, but I think it's Packers. And I think it actually just got flexed up today. But I have nothing but positive things to say about either team. That it was just a really good game. I walked away last night very, very impressed with both teams.
Yeah, so here's some of my thoughts while I was watching the game. I think the first half was San Francisco's half. Watching the game, they had things under control. I thought kind of that they would start pulling away just because their defense is so stacked, and they were clearly showing that in the first and through the second half. Or the second quarter, sorry, of that game last night. But the thing is, I think you always are going to always say, but when's Russell going to start playing, or when's that Russell moment? And we started seeing that in the third quarter. What I thought was also impressive for Seattle was the way their D line took care of that San Francisco offensive line,
Yeah.
which I never thought that they would get that kind of pressure. Javanian Clowney, that was probably the best game I've ever seen him play in. And if they can replicate what they did last night, especially with him, they looked like one of the best teams in football. One of the flaws I would say to Seattle right now is I am not impressed with the supporting cast behind Russell.
No.
And Tyler Lockett, I think he had a leg injury part of that second half. But you sit there and with all those variables, man, it just proves to show what kind of a season that Russell Wilson is having. I sat back and there was one moment which surprised me, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think for a long time, myself, I undervalued what Russell Wilson meant to that Seahawks team and what he means to the NFL as a whole. But after watching last night's game, right now he's sealed for me as the MVP. He's carrying a whole team on his back. I have never been as impressed with Russell Wilson as I was last night in his performance, because it was a grit performance against that kind of defense and what they were throwing at him. It to me just kind of goes back to the point too of what you were kind of hitting at Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that is going to be San Francisco's biggest Achilles heel, because once you start getting into the playoffs, once you start getting into these games, I would never want Garoppolo as my quarterback. Based on last night's performance, there was probably about 3 times where that game shouldn't have gone to overtime, where they simply dropped a couple interceptions. Seattle during that fourth quarter were truly showing that they were the better team last night. But that's what I think. I think Jimmy Garoppolo and San Francisco should be most worried about after losing the way that they lost last night, is how poor Jimmy Garoppolo looked during those high pressure moments, because he's never going to get away by throwing those especially the 2 to the middle linebackers. He's never going to be able to get away with that again. You know,
No,
um,
no.
what? Well, I will also say for San Francisco, he didn't get any help from the wide receivers. The one interception just went through, I forget his 84's hands, and Seahawks get that interception, and that happened like
Mm.
4 times last night where those wide receivers it just went through their hands, and Seattle
Yep.
should have gotten those interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
The other throw, which was huge, and he completely missed the throw. He had a wide open Debo Samuel going down the field, and he underthrows it, and Griffin gets that opportunity to stretch his hands out. He should have had
Yep.
that, and that
Yep.
also could have sealed where they were at in that game if he would have hit
Yeah.
that throw.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing is I just don't trust Garoppolo in those moments. And you
Yeah.
need to have a quarterback to where you can say he's not going to lose us the game. And
Yeah.
I don't know if Garoppolo's that guy or not. But like you said, I did walk away from the game like the 49ers are for real. They're here and they're a force all the way around. Their old line to their defense are a force. And I go back to what I said last week. You can see where teams match up in a lot of areas. The last variable is your quarterback. And that's why I picked Seattle to win this game was the variable is Russell Wilson. And
Oh yeah.
and I don't know where I have Seattle finishing this out. That's really interesting to me at this point. They're on ESPN. They've got them ranked at number 4. But yeah, and they're still still behind. I would say the way that ESPN has them ranked at number 4, I would put them at 3 and put
Yeah.
Baltimore at 4. That's one thing I do disagree with is Seattle is probably the 3rd best team, I would say. And just because San Francisco only has 1 loss, that's why you put San Fran still ahead of them. I would almost say, yeah, I still gotta stay Patriots at number 1. Even though, as much as I'd like to say, based on that performance last night, I would put San Francisco at number 1. My biggest thing is Jimmy Garoppolo. That's the only thing that'll stop people from putting him at the number 1 spot. Because if he has to go up against Russell Wilson or he has to go up against Aaron Rodgers, which most likely he will, who do you got? And
Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson.
I don't got Jimmy.
I'm not a believer in him yet.
So that's where that San Francisco team at. I mean, they may be a great regular season team for the next 3 years, but if you don't have that quarterback play, you're just going to be another Dallas making their run, getting into the playoffs, and then you lose.
You're going to be like 2013 to 2017 Chiefs with Alex Smith. Yeah, you're going to win games in the regular season, but you're not going to have success in the postseason.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, I mean, the way I kind of look at it, I mean, I would have to say I would rather want the way that Alex Smith performed compared to Jimmy Garoppolo last night. I mean, it was bad. Those last couple drives where you needed Jimmy to be on, he was bad. I mean, there isn't no way to fluff it or for some reason I have no idea how they somehow magically would get up the field with penalties or a great run, but they made it, and got that last field goal which they needed to send it into overtime. And then I really thought, Russell throws that interception, which I was like, man, this is going to be 49ers are going to come back and get that field goal. They get themselves in the field goal range, and he totally shanks it to the left,
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, man, this game could actually end in a tie, but
Yeah.
Seattle squeezed it in there to get the win, man. And I I I kind of was like, man, it would be a little bit fitting for this game to end in a tie, but at the
I was
same
hoping it would.
yeah,
I really was.
at the same time, based on some things that happened in the fourth quarter, Seattle owned basically the last 5 minutes of that quarter. So
Yeah.
if you're saying a team that kind of was performing near the end, I would say it would have been Seattle.
Mhm.
But it's
I will
crazy.
say I will say that one thing that San Fran has going for them is next time they play, they should have Kettle back, and
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think that could make a
yeah,
difference.
no, it definitely will.
Hmm.
He's been Jimmy's guy for this whole
Hmm.
entire season. Not having him definitely hurt.
Yeah,
Um, and you're right, it will make a difference. But can you go to Seattle and actually win that game? Like you said, that's going to be a huge test.
yeah,
And but man, I keep going back to, man, Russell Wilson is for real. Like
hmm
that dude is something else special. Like,
oh yeah,
I mean, I don't know why. I think I think maybe just the place that he plays, maybe it's into the Pacific Northwest, all these reasons, but
hmm
we overlook the dude. I mean, I overlook the dude all the time.
yeah,
When you're thinking best quarterbacks, you're like, Drew Brees, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady,
hmm
uh,
yeah,
but you never really throw Russell in there. But man, last night
mm,
I was like, man, Russell is one of the best in our league, hands down.
oh yeah,
Uh,
oh yeah.
and
Because he can do it all.
he really can.
He can beat you with his legs, and he can bomb one. And I love watching Russell Wilson play because you don't know what he's going to do. It's a lot like how I feel when I watch Mahomes play. It's like you don't know what he's going to do. He could run for 20 yards, or he's going to run, roll out, and he's going to throw the ball while he's like in the air and
Yeah,
complete it for an 80-yard touchdown.
yeah,
You don't know.
yeah.
And it's just it's a lot of fun watching Russell Wilson play. Not when he's playing with my Chiefs, but it's a
Right.
lot of fun when he's playing 31 other teams because it's just he's magic with that football. And I think he's underrated and definitely not appreciated enough.
Yeah,
He's a Super Bowl winner. He's been to two. He's won one,
yeah.
and
He
nobody talks about him.
he's based on the stats and everything that he's accomplished. I will say he's the most clutch quarterback. He's
Yeah.
got the most fourth quarter comebacks out of any quarterback that's playing right now, and the most fourth quarter touchdowns out of any
Hmm.
quarterback that's playing right now. Um, that's what I left the game. I was like, I left the game. I left last night being like, Seattle's defense is so for real that it's going to carry them. I mean, we always say defense wins championships, but
Hmm.
I don't I don't think you can do it with your quarterback gonna get some big mistakes. And I don't think, based on the matchup of where Seattle's at and based at where San Francisco's at, and some other teams, and where Green Bay's at. Green Bay's got a solid defense, solid offense, and where they're at as well. Um, so
Hmm.
if you go back to where there's a lot of similarities on paper, but what's the biggest difference? It's that quarterback, man. And
Yeah.
I can't trust Jimmy G right now with where he's at, just based on those
Hmm.
last
No.
couple things. Um,
Yeah. No, I agree.
so another game that happened, which kind of shook up where things are at, is the Vikings come back and get a good win against the Cowboys. Kind
Hmm.
of some last another time where Dallas kind of fails at the end to get back into it, does convert a crucial fourth down, and end up losing that game. And the Vikings coming back and winning. Right now, the Vikings are at seventh. Um, and then behind them is the Texans, which once again I would flip that based on what the teams are at and what they're doing. Um,
Hmm.
so so that was another shakeup. Was there another matchup that you saw, Jamie? That kind of surprised you or kind of shook things up?
Well, yeah. My Chiefs losing to the Titans.
You want to get into that? You ready for
I
that?
guess
You
I
ready
guess
for
we
that?
can dive into that.
I was gonna give it a little bit of time, man. I was gonna ease
Uh,
into that for you, but we can get into that, man.
I need to
There's a
just get it off
whole
my chest.
man. I tell you that. Oh man. All right, let's hear it. What's happening. Let's get this
Okay.
vent going.
So, all right, Mahomes came back from dislocating his knee. It was like 20, 21 days, something like that. Played beautifully. 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. He's sitting at 18 touchdowns with 1 pick and like 2,000, like 2,700 yards. Wonderful. You still got to put him in the MVP talk because his stats are just still there, even though he didn't play in 2 games and the second half of one. Stats are still there, which is wonderful. The defense, a lot of Chiefs fans that I've seen are blaming the defense for this loss. The defense gave up 20 points. The offense gave up a touchdown on the fumble. The defense got the stop when they needed to get the stop. Just should have won the game. When I look back at this game and the highlights, and against my will, I went back and rewatched the whole thing because I'm like, I have to watch it again. I didn't want to, but I had to. I blame obviously the special teams. The special teams blunders were bad and cost us the game. I blame our loss Sunday on the offense, and I blame it mainly on Andy Reid. Now, a lot of Chiefs fans that I've talked to and I've seen are wanting Andy Reid fired like yesterday. Do not agree, will not agree. He's the best head coach that we've ever had, minus Hank Stram, and an argument can be made for Schottenheimer. But when it comes to postseason success, we have not had a head coach that has led us to what we've had so far that isn't named Hank Stram. Okay. On 3rd and short, instead of running the ball to get us at least, get the first down, melt the clock more, Andy calls a rollout that doesn't work, and Mahomes has to just basically slide, losing like 7 or 8 yards, pushing us farther back from the field goal. That was the blunder that I think sealed the game. When you've got Darrell Williams, he's an underrated running back we have, averaging about 7 yards a carry in that game. Why don't you use him? I understand we have Mahomes and he can make things happen. I get that. But the defense knew that as well. And I think rolling Mahomes out, pushing us farther back, nothing there, he slides to not take a hit, was, I believe, just the seal. Because as soon as I saw that, and when I watched it the second time, it just made sense. Everything went downhill from there, and we lost the game. Now, the Chiefs, I believe, are still a team that nobody wants to play. Okay? We've got a defense that I believe has proved that it can make stops. We held a very, I would say, a good Minnesota team to almost nothing. I mean, Dalvin Cook is leading the lead in rushing still, and we held him to nothing. We held Stephon Diggs to 4 yards, but somehow Ryan Tannehill was able to beat us. Okay? I still believe the Chiefs Our team, nobody wants to play, and especially play twice. But I will say this: we, as of right now, are not a very good playoff team.
Right.
We've definitely kissed. We're looking at about a third seed at best. We home field advantage is definitely out the window. That could be in our favor because now we are 4-1 on the road. We've played a lot better. We've lost 2 games at home.
Right.
We're 4-1 on the road,
Which is
so
unusual
that
for the
could,
Chiefs.
yeah. I just don't believe. I believe that we can win the division. The Raiders are now 1 game back. I believe that we can still beat the division. I'm not scared of the Raiders, Chargers, or Broncos. I just don't believe this is going to be a playoff team. I don't think with the AFC, with the Ravens, with the Patriots, I mean, Houston, I don't see this team going back to the conference championship, and I definitely don't see us going to the Super Bowl. Could this be an overreaction and then next Tuesday I'm singing their praises? Probably. We play next Monday as Monday night. We play in Mexico against the Chargers.
Yeah.
I am I overreacting? Probably.
Well,
But as of right now, this isn't a playoff team.
there's a lot of things I think that I saw. There were two things were major things to me. The last 5 minutes of the Chiefs Titans game for the Chiefs was probably the worst way that the last 5 minutes of a game could go for a team. Like what you
Mm-hmm.
said, I agree with you. Some bad play calling, but there was also a reason why I think Andy puts the ball in Pat Mahomes' hand is because I think earlier in that game they went for it on a fourth down and they ran it with Williams, and Tennessee ends up getting the stop and getting the ball
Yeah.
turned over. Which I still, I'm always in favor of putting in the most crucial moments, you put the ball in your best player's hands and you make something happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whether that should have been a rollout or that should have just been a straight up out of shotgun, you try to get a slant in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still looking at I'm putting the ball in Mahomes' hand. So I can't fault Andy with that logic. I don't know if you would want him rolling out. Uh, you know, there's questions with that, and like you said, getting that much of a loss is there.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is you can't allow any rusher to rush on those kind of yards. The Titans' offensive line basically had their way with the front seven of the Chiefs, which
Mm-hmm.
is interesting, like you said, how well they did against the Vikings the week before. Um, so you've got a team that has these elements, right? And and for whatever reason, I kind of agree with you. You messaged me after the game, and you're just like, this team just does not play well once Mahomes gets back. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like Mahomes gets back, and this team just like doesn't look the same. Like they are expecting this Mahomes magic every game,
Yeah.
which I will say, Mahomes played amazingly for being
Mm-hmm.
away for a couple of weeks and coming back and having over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the dude is a warrior out there. Every game that
Mm-hmm.
he plays, but to me, those were the two things. I mean, you still can't have a running back do that to your to your defense, and then, like I said, the last minute of that game, just I have no idea what was going on or what the logic was with some of what was the defensive schemes happening there. Just letting him
I
just
don't
go
know.
down and get that touchdown, man. Um,
Yeah.
but to me, the last 5 minutes was just poorly managed as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, special teams, defense, and offense. Like you couldn't find a better way to lose a game. That's
Yeah.
why when I looked at that game when I was watching, I was like, man, I was like, I can't believe that just happened. Like
Yeah.
Kansas City looked like they were in control the entire game and lose it the last 5 minutes of that game. It was
Yep.
insane. And it's like the Titans have always done that twice now to the Chiefs, where
Hmm.
unexplainably they get a win against them. And so uh
Yeah.
the Chiefs, the Titans have played the Titans are a weird team because they'll come out and they'll, you know, they call them trap games in college football, and the Titans
Hmm.
are just one big trap game. Because
Yeah.
man, if you get Derrick Henry going in a game, he's he's one of the hardest running backs to stop if you've got that
Yeah.
train going, man. And he's
You
shown
get him
that,
running downhill,
yeah.
he's gone. Yeah.
Like as soon as he started getting those runs like that against the Chiefs, I was like, man, this is gonna be a long day for Chiefs Kingdom. When you
Hmm.
got Derrick Henry running like that, I was like, man.
Yeah.
Um, but I have no I. It would be absurd and absolutely ridiculous for Chiefs fans to be like, we need to fire Andy Reid. That would be the
Oh, it's
worst.
all over the place.
It would be the
Yeah.
worst mistake, or the worst concept that Chiefs fans can have.
Hmm.
Uh, the yeah, I will say I don't understand sometimes where Andy Reid can look like a master at play calling and then like a Padawan using a Steelers term
Yeah.
at times where he's just like, ah, let's just throw
Yeah.
it really far and see if Tyreek can get there. We're like,
Yeah.
we'll try it. But
Just
but I
toss it. Someone will catch
yeah,
it.
Tyreek will get there. But like, man, I keep going back to that Vikings game, and I'm like, man, Andy Reid has never called a better, like, that game was beautifully called all the way through. Uh and so to think that Andy Reid is the problem in Kansas City is absurd to me. Because secondly,
Yeah.
who are you gonna get? Who who is going to come who can you tell me is
Yeah.
better than Andy Reid? You tell me if you can find a better candidate than Andy Reid. So who's gonna leave? Who's gonna leave and come and be a better coach than Andy Reid right now for the Chiefs? You
Nobody.
know? Uh
There's nobody.
yeah.
And that's what I was trying to tell Chiefs fans, because that's actually what calmed me down on Sunday, because I was just like depressed and I was mad. Like, how can we lose to Tennessee of all teams? We lost to Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we're not gonna beat the Patriots. We're not gonna win another game this year. Like, I was in a bad place on Sunday. And so I started going down Twitter, and all these other Chiefs fans are overreacting way worse than me. And that's what actually calmed me down. I'm like, it's really not that bad, is it? And I started going back a couple of years. The Chiefs always lose to a team, one or two teams a season that we should beat. Usually it's the Raiders. But uh yeah. But this year it was Tennessee. And I just started thinking, I'm like, you know what, man? We're gonna be okay. You know, I see us 10-6, 11-5. We'll go into the playoffs and we'll see what happens. You
The
know.
biggest thing I would say, the biggest detriment now is not your defense, but actually your O line. You get
Yeah.
two major injuries during that game. Your
Mm,
offensive line's getting beat up. That's going to be one of your, I think, one of the biggest Chiefs' biggest flaws going in the next, or not flaws, but like realities, is how beat
mm,
up this O line is. Uh,
mm-hmm.
and but the Chiefs the Chiefs aren't are far from done. And then the whole thing with Andy Reid being fired, that's just crazy talk.
Yeah.
um, so last shout out game, I guess I'd like to add in are my Steelers beating the Rams. Didn't I picked them. I picked them. I didn't think they would
I
pull it
didn't.
out. I but the Steelers are their defense, man. You gotta
Yeah.
say, if you go back and watch some of their highlights, that defense
Mm-hmm.
is pretty exciting now.
Yeah.
Great. They defend every, and Mika Fitzpatrick, man. I can't say enough of how much that has meant to that defensive backfield. And I know that's an Alabama homer thing to say, but he's had he had 2 interceptions the week before, and he had an interception in this game, and caused a fumble as well. So I mean, I got to hand it to my boy. Like shout out to Mika Fitzpatrick for coming on that team, and look, the
Mhm.
Steelers won an ugly game. They played horrible on offense, but they found a way to win, and they keep finding ways to win week after week.
Yeah.
And who knows where they end up? But the but hey, at this point, I kind of find it ironic. At this point, the Chiefs and the Steelers have the same number of losses at this point.
Yeah.
Which is ironic to me because
Yeah.
they looked like they were dead in the water. So which also says in the AFC it's going to be a struggle to be a wild card. Like there are so
Mhm.
many wild card teams at this point. It's crazy.
Yep.
But the Chiefs are going to win their division. It would be utter chaos if they didn't. Now, if they lose
Yeah.
against the Chargers, we're going to have to reevaluate where things are at.
Yeah. And if the Raiders win,
yeah.
yeah.
But I still I couldn't fathom the Chiefs not winning their division even right now with where things are at because you're this offense is way uh, even the pieces on defense that the Chiefs had, but especially on offense, you talk about a high caliber offense with the pieces they have.
Mhm.
Oh man, but that O line's scary. I would say the most
Mhm.
scary thing for the Chiefs. So
Yeah.
enough. We've kind of delved in the power rankings really long this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so going into the we'll kind of move along at a little faster pace.
Mhm.
Some reaction to Alabama versus LSU. Um,
This is you.
this is
This is
me.
all
This
you.
is where I get to
Yeah.
vent.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I I was very disappointed in the first half. It was the first time that I had felt like Alabama wasn't ready to play. And
Mhm.
that's very not like Alabama because they always look like the team that's more prepared and will out prepare you. The
Mhm.
first half, that was not the case. Uh, but for being a lot of, especially how young this defense is for Alabama, the way that they came back in the third quarter shows you what kind of resiliency this team has, and shows you how it. And this is another crazy thing. There's actually LSU fans that. I'll get back to this in just a second. But in that third quarter, the way that Alabama came back to an LSU team that had a very good game plan, ran the ball really well. Joe Burrow, can't say enough of how great of a player he's playing this year. Uh, I never expected that from Joe Burrow, but he may end up actually being picked ahead a lot of like Tua or Jalen. Like he may be the first quarterback to go, which it wouldn't hurt my feelings because then Tua wouldn't have to play for the Dolphins. So Joe Burrow can go.
It'd be the Bengals right now.
Oh yeah, or I don't know,
So.
man. I don't want Tua playing for the Jets, the Bengals, or the Dolphins, man. So like that's fine, clear them out. I don't want to put
Yeah.
that on anybody. Um, but the way that Alabama fought back, I didn't think that team had it in them to kind of to fight back. They had the pieces, they had the skill players, and obviously the wide receivers for Alabama came through in the second half to kind of close the gap. But you look at the incredible athletic talents on both sides of the field. Um, there's a lot of mainly it just you can't have the number of turnovers that Alabama had and
Mhm.
expect to win. Um, can't have the mistakes and the penalties like Alabama had and expect to win a game.
Mhm.
Um, I I just really give all the credit mainly has to do with the way that LSU performed, um,
Mhm.
and everything to do with the way that Alabama forced them to play an entire game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what impressed me about both teams. And the biggest thing when you look back at this game, um, the biggest plus that Alabama has is they were down by 10. They had about a minute and 40 seconds left, and that's where you get the 6 second touchdown of just throwing it up to Devontae Smith and he going and getting that touchdown. And then you get that 46-41 score. That was huge, and will be huge to where that game ends at being 5 instead of 10 points. It's a huge. It doesn't seem like it would seem minute looking back, but when you look at that score, that's a huge plus for Alabama getting that last touchdown. They get that onside kick. Technically, if they got that onside kick, I don't know if LSU could have stopped them from scoring with a minute left.
I don't think so.
And they almost got that onside kick, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so now for the next 10 years, like all teams, if you beat Alabama, it's better than winning a national championship. So that should tell you how good my team. That's how good Bama is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've processed it. I'm good. The playoff implications. The top 6 came out. They had LSU's at 1, Ohio State at 2, Clemson at 3, Georgia at 4. Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that one.
Isn't this what I said last week?
Yep.
Wasn't this almost how I had it ranked last week?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's funny.
5 is Alabama and 6 is Oregon. But
yeah.
The thing that I'm struggling with is Georgia loses to South Carolina and Alabama beats South Carolina 43-13. Georgia's best win of the season is Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, I think, is down to losing 3 games and is not as good as everybody thought Notre Dame was. So, with those reasonings and I don't know if you could go ask anybody and you would say, who you putting your money on, Alabama or Georgia? I don't know if you would find anybody who would put their money on Georgia over Alabama except for a Georgia fan.
Yeah.
There you go. So number 4 should be Alabama, even with the loss. That's what you take that LSU or the loss to South Carolina is the way I kind of look at it. And I would tell you, and I would say this, I would also say Texas A&M would beat Notre Dame. So that Alabama beating Texas A&M is a better win, which nobody would agree with than Georgia beating Notre Dame. But I really do think Texas A&M, if not beating them, would definitely, I don't know. I really do think Texas A&M could beat Notre Dame. So I agree where things are at. So I've got to become a big Tiger fan on both Tigers, which is hard to swallow, man. So I really got to have Auburn and LSU win out. And then we shellac Auburn. Auburn's got to play Georgia this week. So, man, I've never been a bigger Auburn fan. Man. So ironic.
I was gonna say Georgia's gonna lose. Georgia's gonna lose a game, and it'll probably be this weekend. And Bama's gonna be. I think once the playoffs start, Bama will be at least number 3 on the list by the playoffs.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah, it's just you still can't look at the teams that are playing right now and if you really ask yourself who are the top 4 teams in football, I don't know if you can have that list without Alabama.
No,
even with a weak schedule, just when you watch Alabama play, if you can't say that they're one of the best in the nation, I would question your football IQ.
Yeah. I still can't even say that LSU is better than Bama. Even though LSU won, I can't say that LSU is better. Yeah. Bama has just controlled college football for so long They had one bad night. That doesn't mean they should be at number 5. There's not 4 teams better than Alabama. I'm telling you. And this is as someone that would love to see them not win a national championship for the once in, like, since we've been in high school. I would love to see them not win a national championship for a couple years, but I cannot, as unbiased, tell you that there are 4 teams better, because there isn't.
Yeah. That's where I'm at. I mean, I understand why Alabama's ranked 5, and we need things to happen. But it's kind of like you said, and I'm trying to get my fandom out of it, but just from looking at football and looking at the athletes and the talent that Alabama has, you can't say that they're not a top 4 team. It's just, I don't know what other way to look at that,
No.
The same way I look at Ohio State and LSU, I would tell you they're the top 4 team. The only one that I'm questioning a little bit is Clemson. Because Clemson has probably a worse schedule than Alabama, if not the same. It's actually, I would say, worse than Alabama's, even though they had the same best win. The best win that Clemson has is Texas A&M. So, and Clemson has almost lost like probably 3 times this year, when they should be rolling on teams. So, I mean, that's where I kind of have it at. Last week I said that there's no way that Alabama gets into the playoffs. And then when I really began to think about it, and the way things are playing out, well, really what happened was the Penn State loss really is what really shook things up. Minnesota goes all the way to 8. And so Penn State drops to 9. And so we don't know where Minnesota will end up. If Minnesota, if they went out, I mean, they definitely deserve to be in the college playoffs. Because that means,
I'm rooting for them.
That means that they would be that they'd have to beat Ohio State. Alabama's in an okay spot. It's good that they lose early. One of my favorite quotes that Nick Saban said that is, "We never want to waste a failure." And it was one of my favorite quotes that he said after the game. And I was like, man, it's a really powerful quote. We never want to waste a failure. And kind of, we've talked about in the past, because some of your best life lessons can be only learned through failing. And so, so I love that Nick Saban said that, because I completely agree. So, losing early is better than losing late. So,
yes.
That's what I have. I agree. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Nope. There's not 4 teams better than Bama. So that's what I gotta say about that.
Yeah, and like I said, the way things may play out, Alabama may find a way back in there. Something I'm just really interested in as we round out tonight, and something that's kind of getting even more and more in popularity, are the celebrity boxing, and especially looking at the KSI versus Logan Paul matchup. This is the second time that they were matched up. Some crazy money for YouTubers boxing. Both KSI and Logan Paul received $900,000 for the match. Should we even be talking about this? Some people are like, why are you even talking about this? Well, here, one of the writers for Forbes, this is where I'm getting this information. He said the KSI and Paul generated, the article I wrote that they recap the fight, has been viewed more than 63,000 times. The Alvarez versus Koloff UFC fight that he covered, or Kovala. I know that UFC fans are going to hate me for not knowing how to pronounce Sergey. I know it in my head, but anyways, the UFC fight, 244, the best match title fight only got 44,000 views. And he's saying based on that kind of interest, you could see more celebrity boxing matches start to happen. And so I know that you've kind of grown up in being a little bit of a boxing fan or a boxing fan. And so I just want to get your perspective on your thoughts of these YouTubers kind of battling it out.
I honestly, boxing is not what it used to be. You know, I think it started going downhill. I'm not a fan of Floyd Mayweather at all. And I think it started going downhill with his popularity. It became more about the money and what it became more about the money and what you could do outside the ring instead of who you fight and what you do in the ring. I didn't know that Logan Paul and KSI had a fight before this. I didn't even know who KSI was until before I Googled him today. I don't think that their little fight should even have boxing in front of it because they're not boxers. You know, anybody that you say they're a boxer, you automatically put them in the same category as former boxers by the name of Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, George Foreman, Joe Louis, Joe Frazier. The list goes on. These guys got paid a lot of money to pretend to be boxers. If this means if boxing suddenly becomes about celebrities fighting, it's not going to do anything for the sport because Logan Paul and KSI did not bring anything to the sport, and they're not taking anything with them from the sport because they are not boxers. If celebrities want to start fighting each other, cool. They're not boxers. You're not Muhammad Ali. You're not Lennox Lewis. You're YouTubers. You're a celebrity for something else. You know, I almost say stay in your lane. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, do you think that part of the second question is do you think these type of matches will bring not to the same level of where boxing was ever at during its boom and time, but do you think that matches like these will bring back more, more of an audience for other real quote unquote real boxers in the future? And so that's where I kind of keep going back and forth on it. I do agree that when I watched the highlights of KSI and Logan Paul, that was pretty awful of what, how compared to the professional boxers had been all they eat, breathe, and live is boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's just
I
hard
didn't even watch
because
the highlights.
yeah, well, it's just you always want to see athletes perform the best athletes compete against the best athletes at what their profession, um uh, oddly enough, I won't lie, I enjoyed watching Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. Like, I was all over that,
Yeah, yeah.
um, even though that really wasn't the best that boxing had to offer. It got me
Mm-mm.
interested,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to see more UFC and more boxing, intermix. Like, I want to get
Mm-hmm.
a boxer that would say, "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna go fight UFC." Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that where you see professional athletes from their what they bring from different years of experiences, You know, I think that'll actually bring more credibility, not credibility back to boxing, but more viewership. I think more
Mm-hmm.
people will get more involved with that because I think where all this YouTuber and these celebrities wanting to box each other is coming from is where Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather kind of I think initiated all of this with their
Yeah.
boxing match. I I don't I don't know, you know, if you're sitting back and you're trying to be a promoter, you're trying to figure out how do we get young people to watch more boxing? How do we get them engaged with the sport? I don't know if it's a terrible thing that we have, you know, people being engaged in YouTube fights, you know. Um it's just not it's not great box. It's like you said, it's not and I've seen friends that box in the local area and things. There's a clear difference when you start seeing the real athletes and the real professionals going at it.
Yeah.
It brings entertainment. Um,
Mm.
but if you're sitting back as the sport of boxing or like a promoter, is this a bad thing for the sport? Um, I don't know. I think there's two ways of looking at it where you kind of make a mockery out of boxing that you can just want to throw these scenarios. But at the same times, these are what younger fans, the 12-year-olds to 16-year-olds want to watch. And
Yeah.
obviously it generated a lot of money for those type of kids to be watching.
Yeah. The problem with boxing right now is MMA. You know, a lot of boxers went to MMA, and because you still have guys that will stand up and they won't do takedowns, they won't kick you. They'll stand up in the cage in the octagon and punch you in the face a whole bunch and knock you out. You know, and so and there's more money in UFC and even Bellator right now. Boxing as just boxing, I would say is dead or if not close to being dead. Now, Logan Paul, I just don't see Logan Paul and KSI bringing anything to it because it wasn't a boxing match. It was a backyard brawl and they just had gloves on. You know, it just I just like I said, man, I didn't know they fought one. I didn't know they fought twice now. Well, I mean, I knew about the second one because I actually saw it, but the first one had no idea because it wasn't boxing to me, and I'm not gonna pay attention to it. I probably saw a headline: two YouTubers start punching each other in the face. Cool, like, all right. I would have had no idea it was a boxing match if I'd have seen Logan Paul versus KSI. I'd have had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they bring anything to the sport because they're not athletes. Now Conor McGregor versus um oh
Mayweather.
Mayweather. Yeah. That was something that I was interested in as well because McGregor is one of the top UFC fighters and Mayweather is one of the top of a bad boxing um, division.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're the two of the tops of their sport. They're athletes, So of course we'd want to see them fight. Who's better, an MMA fighter or a boxer? I still say McGregor's better, but no, I just don't. I don't care that two
Yeah.
YouTubers wanted to fight.
I do
You
agree
know?
with you on the standpoint of boxing does feel like it's one big money grab. Um,
Yes.
and I do agree with like I never felt that way with like you said when you had the Rumble in the Jungle.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch kind of the old highlights of George Foreman and Mike Tyson, they
Mm-hmm.
I know that they were making good money then and had good purses, but at the same time that the sport was completely different.
Yeah.
And
Those
there's
guys were fighting to eat. Like Ali was fighting for what he believed in, and he was fighting because a lot of people at that time did not like him. and he was fighting them. He was fighting racism. He was fighting our government. He had a purpose. What was Logan Paul and KSI's purpose? Money.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And Mike Tyson was just an angry dude who wanted to hit people.
Right.
Like, and he did really well for himself.
Yeah.
So I just have a hard time putting them in a boxing match. I feel is like them saying that they're in the same, category as an Ali Tyson Foreman. It's just like you're not. You're not them. You're not in that sport. You're not boxers. You're YouTubers.
Yeah. I will say, as just me looking at the marketing, the social media, all that aspect of it, it's honestly pretty amazing that this kind of money goes around for where these guys created their content from to where they're at today.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me. But people watch it, man. It got me intrigued to ask this question, and when I watched it, I was just like, man, this is like you said, it's a little bit of a backyard brawl type thing, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think boxing and UFC are just kind of in this little flux or something. I don't know. I can't really quite explain it because they're not dead, they're not surging, but they're trying to figure out like what do we do? Like
they're looking for stars.
Yeah.
They're looking for somebody that's going to take the sport and just run with it.
Yeah.
And boxing doesn't have that right now.
Yeah, UFC.
Tyrone Crawford, I think,
UFC,
is someone, but
with Conor McGregor's probably the closest. Because I'm not watching a Floyd Mayweather fight. I mean, I watched a little bit of the Pacquiao, but like, man, if Conor McGregor is on like any fight list, or I'm trying to remember the card, any fight card, I'm watching McGregor. Like they need that again for boxing. They need something like that for boxing to bring back to its popularity. Anyways, guys, let us know in the comments what you thought of tonight's show. Sorry it went a little bit long and we started a little bit late. But please go ahead and watch, comment on what you guys are thinking. Let us know your thoughts. Maybe some stuff that we can talk about in the future. So, we got through our weekend. Me and Jamie vented our losses. But
I feel better.
Yeah, we feel better. We feel better. There's hope. There's always hope. Until there's no hope, and we always say, like every Chiefs fan, next year.
Better luck next year.
Next year, Super Bowl bound. Next year, baby. D Ford, why did you line up offsides?
Oh, don't end the episode like that.
All right, guys. You guys have a great night.
See you guys.